All right. Welcome back to another very, very special episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the city of, well, I'll say Angels today just because of the holidays. Now, as you know, I've been super, super excited about today's show. I've been talking about it for quite some time without revealing who I was going to be speaking to. But you've heard me reference the Stardust Ranch, and of course, we've talked about the Skinwalker Ranch and other places on this planet that have anomalous activity. Anomalous is actually a very mild word. Anyhow, today we're going to be talking about the Stardust Ranch and someone who'd lived there with his wife and had some really gnarly things happen to him and his family, which is another, again, mild way of saying it. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest, the one and only Mr. John Edmonds. Mr. Edmonds, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, the pleasure's all here, believe me. Now, let me back this up. And do you still live there, or because I know it was up for sale a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we're still here. We do a lot of things in other places as well. You know, right now, at least until the end of the winter, this is really going to be where we're at.
Wow. Okay, so you're still. I would be scared to say right now, if I happen to be on Skype with you, I'm curious if something happened like with Carrie Cassidy, which I know her very well, and to see that video was very startling, to say the least. Let me bring you back in time, John, if you don't mind. And after you first bought the ranch, actually, before you even purchased it, did the realtor say anything about previous residents or anything, or was this just a total surprise for you when you got there?
About the it was weird. We had no clue. We were living in Glendale, Arizona, and we had been traveling all over the country. Actually, I mean, even other countries we would like to be. And, we just kept coming up with a dead end because the places that were available in our price range, the worst for their build a place and have to rebuild it from scratch. And looking at, Washington, I looked everywhere, because I'm a water guy, and it's like, it's a lot more thing that you can appreciate than the birth.
What year was it that you purchased the ranch with your wife?
We moved in June 1st.
Wait, you cut off after June 1st. June 1st, what was the year?
1996.
Okay, so you've literally been there for 24 years at this point.
At least, yeah.
When you
feels like a lot more.
Yeah, I would think so, right? With everything happening around. When you first arrived at the ranch, after you'd been there for quite some time, there was a visitor. Am I not mistaken about that? A weird guy with a machete.
I mean, the machete guy showed up. I think we were here. I don't remember the day of the week it was. Probably a weekend. And then the following after the weekend, I was trying to put away things in the house, and this man walked up the driveway, and that was before we put up gates and fenced it and all that. And so he just walked right up the driveway, and he had a big long machete with a leather piece that it was hanging from, and he had it wrapped around his right wrist, and he was just kind of walking with the thing spinning in front of him, just kind of back and forth. And I had already learned that, living out here, probably a good idea to be armed. So I had purchased a 357 Magnum. And so I took the Magnum and put it down the back of my pants and walked outside to find out what this guy wanted. And I stopped him in his tracks and I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he just looked at me and goes, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the guy that just bought this ranch last week." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, I live here." And I said, "Well, you were not in the contract with a realtor and nobody ever mentioned you." So, sorry, but, you're going to have to pack your stuff up and go. I said, where were you living? And he goes, well, you see that building back there? And he pointed to what we commonly call the tack room now, which is about a 600 or 800 square foot building. And he said, well, that's where I live. And I said, okay, here. And he goes, oh, I manage the place. And I said, okay, what do you do? And he goes, well, my number one duty is to kill the monsters. And I just looked at him and I thought, oh, man, here we go. And I have a long history of working as a therapist and a counselor in mental health. And so I'm kind of used to hearing these kind of weird stories. And so I thought, okay, this guy's going to really hit me up with something here. And I said, well, what monsters? And he said, well, this place is full of monsters. And I said, what kind of monsters? And he says, you haven't seen them? And I'm like, no, I've been here a few days. I haven't seen any monsters yet. And he goes, well, trust me, you will. And I said, well, you know what? I'm pretty able to kill my own monsters. So I don't need you. Please pack up and leave. So he walked back to the tack room back there and he grabbed a sheet and rolled up all his stuff in it and threw it over his shoulder, turned around and walked out. And he just looked at me and he goes, you're going to be really sorry. And I said, well, why would I be sorry? And he goes, well, you're going to have to deal with this now on your own. You're going to wish I was here. And at the time I thought to myself, well, good riddance to, bad luck here. But, in retrospect, I probably should have been a little more thorough and found out, really what he was talking about. But he just seemed like somebody who was just a straggler who was, trying to make out at the time. So I really didn't have a lot of, empathy for him at that point. And the ranch is a weird place to begin with. I mean, at the time there was nobody living out here except us. And, if you're talking about, 500,000-600,000 acres of just absolute wild desert. In those days, you wouldn't see another human being for, hours, even days at a time, not even a car.
Did you ever run into this gentleman, in the last 24 years anywhere in town, or did you ever ask anybody about him?
No, because there's really, believe it or not, we still don't know any people out here. After all these years, people out here pretty much stick to themselves. We've talked to a few neighbors here and there, but, we really don't know anybody here.
And now, when did the incident happen? I'm assuming right after this incident where the furniture from the prior owner was still there and you called the realtor up?
Yeah, that actually happened even before the machete guy.
Okay.
The day we moved in, everything was in the house. It was like they took our money. I paid cash for the place. And the fact I showed up with a briefcase full of cash, and everybody just looked at me like, what are you doing? This isn't like, a drug deal or something. And I'm like, hey, I thought it was like buying a used car. I never bought a house before, so I showed up with a big briefcase full of cash. And the realtor just looked at me like he was embarrassed. And I didn't know any better. And so he said, you got to take that and put it back in the bank and get a bank check. And I was like, all right, cool. I can handle that. So I, went and got the bank check and paid them. And I thought everything was done. And so I went to come back with a rental truck with all my stuff in it. And the people hadn't moved out. And I'm like, what the heck? This isn't going to work. And so I called the realtor and I said, hey, DJ, what's the deal here, guy? People haven't moved out and, I got a rental truck and I got to take it back and I got all my stuff in it. And he goes, let me find out. So, he went and got hold of the people and called me back and he goes, look, they got the day mixed up or something. They're going to move out, come back tonight. And I was like, well, that kind of sucks, but all right. So we went back about 8:00 that night and, I walked in the house was empty. Everything was vacuumed. I was like, cool, looks better. And I said, to Joyce, I said, look, I'm going to go look at the pool and make sure everything out there is okay. So I went to walk out to the pool, and this is a big diving pool. It's got a, like a 10-foot deep end, and, it's significant. Well, everything that had been in the house was now in the pool. And when I say everything, I mean like washer and dryer. I'm talking refrigerator. I'm talking the whole 9 yards. Everything was piled up in the pool. And I was horrified. I was extremely pissed off. So I called up the realtor again, and I said, now it's all in the pool. What's the deal? And he goes, I don't know. I talked to them, and they said they were going to move it out and get rid of it. And I said, who's they? And he said, the owners. And I said, well, it's all in the pool. And I said, what am I supposed to do? And he goes, well, you know what? Our transaction's completed. You paid for the property, and, we're done. It's your problem. And I was just like, wow, that's service after the sale. Thank you, Century 21. Right. And, so that was it. And I spent like the next, few days having to drag everything out of the pool and get the appliances out with like a winch. And, I got it all out. I got it all moved out and thrown out front. And people, I guess they heard about it and they came by and took it. That's all I know.
Pool was, I've seen pictures. I believe the pool didn't have water or wasn't filled, right?
Oh, no, it was full.
Oh, geez. Okay, then the picture I saw was obviously, it must have been a different time, or obviously it might have not been it. So literally, these were soaked in water, everything from the
Oh, yeah, everything was just floating. I mean, it was, or sunk to the bottom, and it was all, of course, all the big stuff was in the deep end. So, it was quite an ordeal for me to move it all out by myself.
When the realtor told you that the previous owners got the date confused, did you, in hindsight, do you believe what that person said about the owners, or do you think that they just got out of there in such a hurry they didn't care?
I really don't know. I mean, it's, I can speculate as much as I want to, but, there's really no way for me to have any accurate understanding of it. And this story is so weird that I hate to speculate about anything because, we don't have a lot of answers about a lot of things anyway. And, it's one of those stories that, people either understand and they accept it because, they hear my voice saying that I'm trying to be articulated, to be truthful as much as possible, or they just think it's a total load of crap. And, I don't, people that think that, hey, I get it, but it is what it is. It's not like I make any money off of doing this. I'm not out there, trying to create a whole new paradigm in terms of, paranormal or anything like that. We bought a ranch with the idea that we were going to be away from the city. We were going to have horses. We were, going to retire on this property. And, it's turned out to be anything but. It's been one incredible story after another, and it never seems to end.
Still ongoing, and that's the crazy part right there. And to your benefit, and also in case I know you said whether people take it or leave it, just so you know, I personally have always believed you from the moment I heard about this. And to your benefit, there's I can't find it exactly. I'm just going to paraphrase something in the chat room, essentially saying that your story has never changed, which, again, is to your benefit because if someone's telling the truth, their story doesn't change. So just wanted to let you know about those two things. Now, when was the first encounter either with you or Joyce and the first time you saw one of these monsters, a.k.a. Greys?
Well, we didn't see Greys right away. That was the whole thing. In the beginning, because we didn't even have horses when we moved to the property, what had happened was, I'd go out in the desert and I'd take my Jeep out there at the time. I had a Jeep, and I'd drive out in the desert and, make sure I kept the GPS going, because in Arizona, when you get out in the desert, it's real easy to get lost. Because everything looks the same. It's all flat for the most part, maybe a few hills. A lot of cacti, but it all looks the same. And it's like, if you don't know where you are, especially if you're new to an area, it could be fatal. We get 115, 120 degree temperatures here in the summertime, and it's brutal. And it's like, I'm from back east. I'm from Chicago, Evanston, same thing. And, I was not used to those kind of temperatures here. And so you got to be really careful when you drive around out there. But I would go out and look around just because the place is so alien. It's so weird. It's like driving around on the moon, except you can breathe. And I just wanted to see what was out here. But, gradually I started in the evening seeing these, what I call orange orbs. And they would look like, almost like flares or some kind of light. But they would be always in threes. And you'd see them in one part of the sky, usually to the south or the west. And in just a heartbeat, they could completely travel all the way across the horizon and travel to the east. And then just hang there in a stationary position. And I knew they weren't lights in terms of like, a laser or anything like that, or a spotlight. They had to be something. So I got kind of curious with that. I went out and recorded a video, and eventually ended up having that video analyzed professionally, by a place that does scientific analysis. And interestingly enough, they said that the temperature and the color of those lights absolutely perfectly matches the Phoenix lights.
Whoa.
And this was years before, well, at least a year before the actual Phoenix lights.
Which were March 1997.
March 13th, 1997, which we were privileged to watch the entire time.
Okay, so you've seen that too, obviously. Ironically, I happened to be in Phoenix on March 13th, 1997, but sadly, I missed it. I was so upset, and go figure, my luck. The orbs, size-wise, what would you say for each particular orb?
Well, they're different, but I've driven out, eventually got to the point where it was easier to take a motorcycle, a dirt bike, and go out, or a horse and go out there and just kind of wait for them, because I knew pretty much. I just started to get a feeling. I'd seen them so many times that I could get a feeling for when they were going to show up, and so I'd go out and try to be like right in the proximity of them so I could record them, and I was able to stand underneath them and see what they look like. They're pretty big. They're about the size of like a good-sized barn.
Whoa.
In terms of physical size. And they actually have other things inside of them. Now, I don't know what those things are, but they look like spots of black, spots of green, and it looks like it's moving around inside of it. I've got some really good close-ups of them, so I've been able to study them over the years, but you can't really make out what it is. It's just some kind of stuff inside of it.
That actually reminds me of one of the descriptions that George Knapp talked about, one of the orbs at Skinwalker Ranch, and he said the ones that the Sherman family called the blue meanies looked like it was orb, obviously, but they were looked like a glass ball, he said, with the bluish fluid sort of swirling inside. So interesting.
That's it.
Yeah, really interesting.
Imagine like a lava lamp. Like that's what they look like, except they're circular and they're three-dimensional. You can tell that they're not it's not a flat object. I mean, when you look up, you can see it looks like a giant globe, and it's got this stuff inside of it kind of just cooking away.
I think if that happened to me, just that alone, I would probably, with even just what happened with the previous owner's stuff in the pool and the person with the machete talking about the monsters, that would have been three things. Be like, okay, three too many for me. But then again, obviously, I am more scared of these things as opposed to other people. So I have to hand it to you, sir, for sticking around. There's a question in the chat. I'm going to ask it to you. This is from Lasha Senyak, and normally I would stay till the end for the questions, but I thought this might be worth it at this time. It says, were there any strange magnetic qualities to some areas of the ranch?
In terms of magnetic, I have to think about that one. There are certain places on the ranch that there is real intense energy. And what I mean by that is you stand over them, and the hair on your arm will just stand up, or like a horse won't go near it. They spook whenever they get near it. Dogs won't go near it. They'll bark at it, and these things move around. Now, I don't know if that's because there's like a creature there that's invisible, or out of phase, let's say, or what. I have no idea what it is. But yeah, there's certain places that are weird, and then certain times we get water coming up out of the ground. And it's, we live on top of one of the largest aquifers in part of the state. And, so we have, which is very fortunate in the desert, to have water like that. But there's all sorts of weird stuff here. I mean, it's not as weird as it used to be. We've had a lot of people that have moved in around us. There's like 3 homes around us now. Of course, they're only around us, like no other place out here. They had to move in right next door. But, it's not quite as intense as it used to be.
There's someone I want to acknowledge in the chat room. Alex Owen, thank you so much for your super chat and your support. Alex, if it wasn't for people such as yourself, we still wouldn't be here. So I want to thank you for that. John, after the giant orbs, 3, and you saw more than once, obviously, what transgressed from there?
Started seeing actual UFOs. I mean, I don't really consider the orbs to be UFOs. They're just anomalous objects. I mean, you see them. I guess most people would consider them UFOs, but I'm talking about defined ships, flying triangles. We had an incident where there was a giant black triangle over the front corral, and I was standing there with several different people, and I ended up calling the UFO reporting center and making a report. And
Peter Davenport's reporting center?
Peter Davenport, you betcha. And Peter Davenport told me he says, well, you got to get somebody to collaborate this that's in an official capacity. And I said, Peter, I live out in the middle of nowhere. He goes, well, call the sheriff, call the police. I was like, what am I going to tell them? That I've got a UFO over my ranch? And he goes, yeah, tell them there's something really weird. You feel threatened. And I said, oh. I called him up and put him on hold, called them. And a deputy came out. And this was a really particularly strange incident because when he got out to the ranch, which was maybe 20 minutes later, which out here is a really good response time, by the way, he had on a raincoat and he had on a slicker over his hat so that you couldn't see his badge number. You couldn't see the badge number on his uniform. He had taken tape and taped over the number of his vehicle so you couldn't tell which patrol car it was. Nothing.
That doesn't sound right there. I would be a little worried if I called an officer and his identification was taped over.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, I mean, that was the first thing I asked him. I said, look, it's not raining. It's the desert, and it's summertime, and it's like 100 degrees out here. Why do you have on a raincoat? And he just looked at me. And I said, seriously, sir, I called you for corroboration of what this object is, because it was still right over the front corral area. And that's a big area, and it's like 100 by, say 50 or 60. And this thing was not just over the front corral. It covered up half the ranch, and the ranch is 10 acres. So, it was like at least 5 acres in terms of size. It was huge. And it was only maybe 150 feet off the ground.
Whoa,
so, we're all standing underneath this black triangle, looking up at it. There's no lights, there's nothing. And the only way you can tell it's there is if you step to the side and you see the stars behind it. And we tried taking video of it. We tried taking pictures of it. Nothing worked. And like this guy, he just stood there and watched it with us. And I said, so are you going to make a report? And he goes, no. And I said, well, why not? What good are you? And he just looked at me and he says, I'm not going to be associated with this. And I said, why not? And he said, we don't report these things.
I would have been beyond baffled at that point, because I would have thought that he would have heard stories from the previous owner. And even if he didn't, let's just say that was the first time and he didn't believe, but seeing is believing. If I saw a triangle craft 150 feet off the ground, and I'm assuming silent, right? Dead silent, right?
Dead silent. But it was weird because it makes this really peculiar, energetic, where you can feel the power of this object in your bones. It's almost like I don't know. Have you ever sat on top of like a dryer and felt the energy from the dryer making, vibrations through your body.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how to come up with any better description of it, but really low frequency kind of, but you can't hear it. You just feel it in your body. And I could feel it in my chest, kind of like if you're at a concert or something like that, and you can feel that really low bass, kind of hitting your like sternum and vibrating throughout you. That's what it was doing, but there was no sound.
Again, this fits in with almost all the craft that people see, not just triangles. There's a comment in the chat, and I'm just going to read it to you because it's a worthwhile question I'm going to make of it based on something else that we could talk about when we get to that point, which is when you were visited by 2 MIBs. So here's the question coming from the comment. Was the officer human or possibly not human?
I have no idea. I mean, he looked normal to me. He looked like just a regular, deputy. He's probably in his late 40s, had a mustache, light brown hair, white guy. Just looked like a regular guy. But he was well prepared. And see, you know what I'm thinking? Because I didn't tell him what they were coming out to see. Okay. So that tells me that they already knew it was here and prepared the car the way they did and prepared his, to camouflage himself as far as his identification went. He wouldn't tell me his name, nothing. And I reported it because it really pissed me off. So the next day I called the sheriff's department and I tried to get an incident report and reported the whole thing. And they acted like it never happened.
Wow. It almost begs the question that if somebody else was listening on that phone call, maybe someone intercepted it, and as opposed to the regular police, maybe it was some offshoot. I don't know. Again, as you said, you don't want to speculate. This is something we could speculate upon in so many different ways because it's just so odd.
Well, I mean, everything out here is odd, and our entire story is odd, and that's why I cut people slack when they give me a hard time about it. I don't like people giving me a hard time, but I understand why some of them don't believe it. It's, but I mean, I have, I've taken lie detector tests. My wife has taken lie detector tests. We've had, multiple alphabet agencies come out here. We have had, you name it, we have been questioned by the best. We've had some of the largest private, really Ivy League universities come out here and subject us, to full, like an inquisition. I mean, it was like it lasted, 70 hours. We've had, what's his name, up in Las Vegas?
Bigelow?
Robert Bigelow. Yeah, Bigelow sent up his people for a week here. And they investigated the place, and then he tried like crazy to buy it from me. So it is what it is. I mean, it's just one of those things. I think it's a very important, significant story, and I think that I'd be doing the world a disservice by not telling it. But at the same time, it is what it is. You take it or leave it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you are telling this story because you are doing the world a service. Let me give another shout out to Rockstar. Rockstar, thank you for your super chat. And let me say this to you. You rock. And again, thank you for your support. Now, since ironically, John, I wrote down Bigelow, something to bring up later. I'm assuming when you contacted Robert Bigelow, this had to have been in the time that he was at Skinwalker Ranch, because if he sent over his NIDS team, if I'm not mistaken, the current owner of Skinwalker Ranch, Brandon Fugel, no longer is, because he has his own team. I don't even know if NIDS is still there, National Institute for Discovery Science. So what year would have this been when you called Bigelow?
I didn't call him. He called me.
Oh, okay. So he heard about the ranch and he literally reached out to you. Okay, gotcha.
Well, I mean, as things progressed and we started having, literally firefights with the Greys, where I ended up, killing them. The word started getting out there because, I mean, I'm a social worker. I don't like, that's never been in my training to kill aliens. Okay. And, so I was, pretty freaked out by the whole thing. And my wife was like, let's get the hell out of here. I don't want to live here anymore. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is a very important, significant situation. And quite frankly, I don't have the money to go buy another ranch. So guess what? We're stuck here. Okay. And, so I ended up calling, getting on the internet and trying to find anybody that would have any information about, how to handle the situation, what to do, because you can't call the cops and just say, hey, I just killed an alien. I mean, that doesn't work. For all I knew, I'd end up in jail. So I just was like, man, I got to do something here. So I reached out, and Captain Robert Collins, retired from the Air Force, responded to me, and he was really a good guy. He gave me a connection to various different individuals, and that's how we were able to work through the situation.
How long did it take for you to first, I'm assuming before you actually saw graves, did you start hearing noises around the house and things like that?
Well, we had rottweilers, and Ratties are really smart dogs, and they're not afraid of anything. They're kind of clowns as well, and they like to play and stuff. But, my rots would just, freak out. They would just be like, their hair would stand on end, and they'd just become real, their bodies would go stiff, and they would just be like, man, there's a threat, and to see that, but not to see any threat, got me really concerned, because, I kept saying to myself, man, this story's getting weirder and weirder, and I got to just keep my cool and deal with it. Fortunately, coming from a big city, I grew up with, dealing with just the stuff you grow up with in a big city. And that is, there's a lot of crime. There's a lot of situations where you got to watch your back. And so, I already had the presence to be able to, pretty much feel like I could manage anything that came up. And, that's what I did. I just tried to, keep my cool and, deal with it.
Were any of the Rottweilers harmed ever by the
Yes.
ETs?
My best Rottweiler ever, which just broke my heart. He was like the perfect head, the perfect body, great personality, awesome dog. He was out on the property in the kennel, and I came out the next morning to check on him, and he looked like he had been run over by like a steamroller. It was, the entire body was flat to the point where it was like half an inch tall. And he was in an area where there's no way, I don't know how anything could have gotten in there. He was in an 8x10 locked pen behind a fence that was like, 6 or 7 feet tall. So I don't even know how it got in there and did that to him. But it just broke my heart. To this day, it just hurts me to even think about it.
Yeah, that is really sad just to think about. That's a man's best friend, That's a part of your family that you lost.
He was. He absolutely was. And we had at that time, we had my trips out into the desert, I was finding all these horses that have been abandoned out there. And, some of them were probably wild, but most of them were domestic horses that people couldn't afford anymore for whatever reason. And they just drove them out to the desert and released them. And, horses that are domestic horses, all they know is, hey, it's morning, it's time to eat and drink, or, hey, it's, dinner time, it's time to eat and drink. And, they don't know anything about going out there and finding their own food or, using their instinct at all. Once they're domesticated, they don't really have a lot of instinct. And, they were starving out there, and there were a lot of them out there. And so I started driving out with my Jeep and bringing a bale of hay and, bringing a couple of bags of feed and feeding them. And next thing I knew, all of a sudden I had all these new friends. And, I turned around to go back to the ranch. The horses follow me. So that's how I got horses.
I have a picture right now. It's actually a still because I couldn't put the video without permission from Carrie Cassidy, which I didn't have time to ask her for that one clip. I know it's all over the internet, but I have this still where it's the Skype interview between you and her. For the people in the chat where I put there's an ET behind you, can you describe the circumstances? And for those who are just seeing the still, describe what they're looking at.
Well, first of all, you should know, and that is neither of us in the interview even knew it was there until afterwards. Okay, she called me back and she said, "John, there was an ET in the interview." I went, "What?" And she goes, "It looks like there's a gray standing behind you." And I said, "Well, hey, it's Stardust Ranch. Anything's possible." And see, the thing was is that I had like 103 temperature when I did that interview. I was sick as a dog with a flu, and I was just trying to, power through it and get through it. And then all of a sudden I hear about this alien standing behind me, and now it becomes like, this famous incident. So, that's kind of pretty much the background on it.
Now, what year did she interview you?
Oh, man, I could have to go back and look at notes. I mean, she's interviewed me 3 or 4 times. So.
Yeah, I know she's been active for quite some time. 8 years ago, when I first interviewed her myself, I had already seen her videos, I want to say almost a decade. So, yeah, I could see how, maybe the early 2000s, but that's just me guessing based on what I know about her. Now, even prior to this, I hate to jump around in the timeline of this, but I felt it was necessary to talk about it since I put up that picture and I mentioned to people in the chat, check out that ET behind you. Now, at what point did you first start seeing the aliens around the house, or did you actually have the bruises that started to, come around on your arm and your wife's arm and other places like that? Syringe marks too, am I right?
Yeah, we actually started seeing what became known as the burlo man out on the back of the property. We started seeing these things that looked like sort of a human figure, but there was no distinctive detail in terms of like facial features or anything. It just looked like a human outline, but it was probably 8 or 9 feet tall. And it literally kind of looked like old rusty steel wool. So that just sort of got that name. And, they didn't really seem like they were out there to hurt anybody or do anything, but they walked right through solid objects. I mean, it was like they would, if they got in the area of where a horse pen was, they could literally just walk right through the pen. They didn't have to climb over a fence or anything, and it would scare the hell out of the horses. So the horses acknowledged that it existed. And, this started freaking me out because I'm like, well, I don't know what that damn thing is, but, this isn't cool. I've got to get it away from my horses. And so I'd go out and every day and kind of patrol around the horse pens and looking for it. And there were more than one. There was probably at least 3 or 4 different ones. And I just started taking a gun with me. And if I saw one, I'd try to shoot it, but it acted like it didn't even notice. I mean, a bullet would go right through it, and it was like it was in a different dimension or something.
So no harm, literally.
No, nothing.
Wow.
Didn't even act like it couldn't have cared less.
The men in black that came there, did they come after you started talking about this to people? Maybe giving the interview with Carrie Cassidy, calling the police that came that had his ID covered up, or how long after you had been there did that incident where those 2 men in black came? Which, for everybody out there listening, when you tell this story, I think one of the part that really stuck out to me is how they walked through the fence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was at that point we had gates out front. They weren't the gates we have now, but they were lower gates. And 2 SUVs, dark blue GM product SUVs, pulled up in front of the ranch just south of the front gates and parked. And these 2 guys got out of one out of each vehicle and proceeded to walk up to the front gates. And before I could even go out to greet them, they walked right through. I mean, it was like the gates weren't even there. And they began to walk up the driveway. And it kind of, I always say that it reminded me of the Blues Brothers because, they were dark suits and they just, they had sunglasses on.
Hats, right?
Yeah. But they didn't really look official. I mean, here it is, the dead of summer. And these guys are wearing black suits and, it's got to be at least 107, 108 degrees outside. And no expression on their face at all. They got up to about 4 or 5 feet in front of me. Didn't introduce themselves, didn't say who they were, didn't show me any identification or anything. And I said, I need to see some ID, please. And they ignored what I said. And the taller guy looked at me and he goes, you need to stop reporting the incidents that occur out here in Rainbow Valley on the Cause website. And the Cause website was a website at the time. Peter Davenport or Peter Gersten.
Yeah, Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I applaud your being so well informed. It's nice.
Thank you.
Nice change for me. So I and I just looked at him and I didn't say anything, and it repeated it. But the thing that was really interesting was I looked at the skin tone of this individual, and it kind of looked like uncooked chicken. I mean, it had that sort of like yellowish, grayish kind of white, but it didn't look human at all. I mean, it just, it was dressed like a human, but it just, to me, it didn't seem like a human at all. And it was a very monotone kind of just a statement of what it wanted to say. And then it just turned around with the other one and they just walked right back through the gates, got in the vehicles and drove away. And I checked the plates. The plates were, said U.S. government on them. They were white plates with black writing. And it looked very official.
About the ETs, there's something Lasha wrote here. Before I miss it, I think it's something that people would want to hear. So its question reads, let me get to it again. I'll just paraphrase it. She wants to know if you ever heard any of the aliens speak.
No, not the Greys, if that's the one she's talking about. The Greys never communicated with me in any way, shape, or form. The only thing I know about the Greys is they seem to have bad intention because they tried to hurt us. Well, they did hurt us. And, they hurt the animals here. And, I won't put up with that from anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Again, that's your family. And you were there to rescue horses. And if they're harming your horses, I mean, it's like, well, if I just rescued them and they're being harmed, then why am I even, out there helping them? I could imagine how this is so frustrating. And again, it's your family. For those who don't own pets, you have to understand from pet owners that pets are your family. And especially, how long have you been involved with horses prior to the Stardust Ranch?
I where I grew up in Evanston, I always wanted to have horses, but I didn't grow up on the side of town that had money. And so, to me, the closest I was going to get was like in front of like Walgreens, where you put 50 cents in the machine and ride it. So I never had much of a chance to do anything with horses. I would hitchhike out to the western suburbs, and there was a big horse place out there, and I'd go out and offer to clean stalls and stuff and just hang out just to be able to be around horses. But, these were expensive animals and they weren't going to let me ride them or anything. I just wanted to be around them. But I had made up my mind back then that I was going to have a horse ranch someday. I didn't know where, but, I was determined. And I've always been one of those people that if I say I'm going to do something, I get it done.
Follow through with it.
Yeah.
Following up on Lasha's question, she has another one with regards to the Greys. You did mention that you've never heard them speak. Have you ever
heard them hiss?
Oh, you have heard them hiss. Okay, that's interesting to know because obviously that shows to me that they have some sort of vocal cords to be able to squeal, hiss, whatever. Obviously, that's what it shows.
Well, I should give you a little background on that. The only time I ever heard them hiss was when I was in the process of killing one of them.
Which I'm going to get to in 1 minute because I think that's some of the most remarkable stories that you have because not very many people can say that they've actually killed an alien and multiple. I believe it's 19. Am I right?
19 of them. 19 of them and counting.
Real quick, so have you ever tried to communicate with the Greys that are harmful in any way, whether it be through, did you ever send a telepathic message? And I mean, did you say something in your head and then all of a sudden the ETs reacted in a way or anything like that?
I was very clear with them. Get the hell off my property.
And no response?
Didn't work. Wow. No response. It's like they didn't hear it or they didn't care. I mean, I even had people that over the years, I've met a great spectrum of individuals that would like to take credit for things they say they've done. And so, I've got people that have brought out like little signs to hang on the wall. They say that if the Greys read this, that they'll get the idea. None of it's ever made a damn bit of difference. I mean, I've been open-minded. I've tried, and I tried, meditating on it. I tried praying on it. I tried, everything that I could think of to try to make this go away and to, try to turn it into something that was non-threatening. Because quite frankly, I could care less if they were here on the property as long as they don't mess with us and they don't mess with the animals. I mean, I figured, as I've been told, this has been an ongoing situation on this property for thousands of years, and that because of the portals that are here, it's kind of like a interstellar bus station, and various different species of ETs have come through here, and I'm just the guy that happens to live here. So, who am I to say that, they don't have the right to come and go? I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to mess with anybody. I just don't want to be hurt. I don't want my wife hurt. I don't want my animals hurt. That's where I draw the line.
You said you tried, you were willing to try anything. Was an exorcism something that you've ever tried? Bring in someone to bless the property or anything like that?
Yes.
And I'm assuming it didn't make any difference.
It ran the guys off that did it.
Ooh, ouch. So they obviously got scared doing it.
Oh, they got freaked. I mean, they were like terrified. The one guy just, he just skedaddled right at the end of the ceremony. He got sick, literally physically vomited and ran out of there. And the other guy just looked at me like, my God, who are you? And what is this place? See, people don't understand what's here. They hear the stories, they have some kind of an attitude in their own mind about what they expect to see here, but they never know until they actually come here and they deal with it. I've had famous people that were in the music industry and stuff that I used to be friends with come here and literally in the middle of the night get in their car, damn near drive through the front gates, screaming, running out of here.
I'm assuming never came back after that.
Nope, never heard from them again.
Before I get to the killing of the Greys, can you talk about when you had ghost adventures there?
Sure. What would you like to know?
What did they do? I only saw about 7 minutes, almost 7 minutes of a clip from on YouTube about them, and I recall near the end, I believe they told you that they thought it was demonic.
Yeah, we've got all sorts of, everybody's got their opinion, and see, the big thing is this. There seems to be like two schools of thought when it comes to not only the ranch, but also aliens in general. People that are religious, they take the attitude that all these things are demons. Well, you can be something bad and not be a demon, okay? I mean, at the same time, I always tell people that, as far as I understand with demons, that's like a spiritual thing. It could be a physical thing, but, that's got something to do with religion and all that. When you see ships in the sky and you see physical things running around on the property, I don't see how that's demonic.
Yeah. I would. The first thing I would attach to is off-world, another civilization. You're right. I would jump the gun to demonic. And like you said, just because something is malevolent doesn't necessarily mean it's demonic, because we have malevolent humans that are not necessarily demonic.
Exactly. And I've got artifacts. I mean, I have been able to, at one time or another, actually capture artifacts that were left over after the Grey passed away or disappeared.
And that's now, I think this is a good time to get into the killings of the Greys. When was the first time that you realized that they're not immortal and they can be harmed and taken out?
Well, the very first time was literally I was in bed. My wife and I were trying to get some sleep, and I was laying in bed, and at the time I had a pit bull named Daisy, and she would sleep right next to the edge of the bed, at the end of the bed. And she was a great dog, super, super, protective. And she kept waking up, and she would hear things, and she would kind of walk around the room in the middle of the night thinking that, she was going to go get whatever it was. And a couple of times she actually attempted to try to get something, to attack something. And all she did was end up, slamming into the wall or into a door. And I thought, well, that's, sorry, Daisy. I don't know what it is, but there is something here. I agree with you. So I was losing a lot of sleep over this because, I was afraid every time I go to sleep, something was going to happen. It had gotten to that point where the energy was so negative and it was so intense that in a week we'd have 2 or 3 of these types of incidences. And this was the very first incident, really. And I ended up taking a little shorty, I call them shorty baseball bat. They're kind of the bats that they give away on bat day.
Yeah, the souvenir ones.
Yeah, they're like 2 feet long. And, they have the advertising for the team on it and everything, the home team. Well, I had one of those, and I stuck it down in the bed rail of my bed. And my wife's one of those people that when she hits the bed, she's out, So I just kind of lay there, and I was trying to fall asleep, couldn't fall asleep. Then I heard Daisy kind of growling, and I thought, okay, here we go. And next thing I know, on my left arm, I was laying on my back, and my left arm, I felt this kind of clammy, cold hand on my arm. And I thought, okay, here we go. So I took my right hand, and I reached into the bed rail, and I pulled out the little shorty baseball bat. And the hand just kind of started working its way up my arm. And I thought, okay, here we go. And so I turned around, and I grabbed it, and I pulled out that baseball bat, and I thumped it as hard as I could right in the head. And the gray just flew backwards into the bathroom. The door was open to the bathroom right behind it, and it flew back about 3 or 4 feet, and it was just laying there on its back looking at me like, oh, my God, how'd that happen? And I sprung to my feet, and there were 2 more grays to my right at the foot of the bed. Daisy was trying to get up and get after them, but they used some kind of, I don't know, force or some kind of, I don't know what it was, but she couldn't get them. I mean, she was just like Velcroed right to the floor right in front of her, in front of them, like 3 feet away. She couldn't attack them. And I got up and I started to go into the bathroom to take another swing, and it just disappeared. Just blinked out. Gone.
You're actually answering a question that I was about to ask from the chat. This is from Alex Oyen, who goes by in the chat room, Alex Oyen under the veil. Alex, thank you again for your super chat and question. Here goes. When you kill a gray, do the bodies disappear and disintegrate? Which you essentially just said yes.
Well, they do and they don't. It depends if you see. There's no way to know if they're dead because, quite frankly, I mean, a dead one versus a live one, I mean, unless you cut the head off, there's no way to really know it's dead. But, I had one incident where I used a samurai sword and I took a full swing on it and I cut the head off. Now, that one I know is dead.
Yeah, okay. Beheading.
Yeah. But beyond that, it's real hard to tell whether they're dead or not. It's kind of like an antenna. The head is kind of like an antenna. And I think these guys travel interdimensionally because that's how they just disappear. They come and they go. It's not like they, pick the lock on the door and come in the middle of the night or, open a window or something like that. They just transcend our dimension from their dimension. I've even seen them stick their head through and kind of look around to see if they see me.
You mean through the wall? You mean?
Yeah. Wow. They walk right through stuff.
That doesn't surprise me. If you're interested, I'll tell you something interesting. A friend of mine, Preston Dennett, he's a world-renowned author, written over 24 books. And my favorite book, UFOs over California, which, by the way, he's written UFOs over Arizona, Colorado, etc. There's this one case that he talks about where this single mother was an abductee. And she recalls the night before where she was abducted. She remembers after she woke up, but she also remembers that her 7-year-old son was taken that night before. So at the morning, when she's serving him cereal for breakfast, she wants to ask him, but at the same time doesn't want to bring up the aliens in case he doesn't remember. So she says, honey, did you sleep okay? And he says, yeah. So in her mind, she's thinking, okay, well, he doesn't remember. And then the little boy blurts out, but my alien friends came to visit me. And she, a little startled. She was like, okay, I guess she was waiting for him to speak next. And he says, but they always get mad at me. And she was looking puzzled and said, why? And the little boy basically said that every time they come and get him, they walk him through the wall. But he stops to look at all the colored balls. Now, that's a 7-year-old boy talking. And they basically tell the little boy that he cannot stay between the wall because it's dangerous for him, and that's why he has to go through it. And when he described that, and I first read it, the first thing in my mind thinking is, I'm wondering if while that boy is walking through the wall, because the ETs are, through whatever means, like you said, interdimensionally, he's probably seeing things on an atomic molecular level. And so I just thought that's really fitting for what you told me, because that is one trait that I've heard time and time again, is the ability to not just them go through the walls, but if they were to take somebody, to bring them through the walls.
I have seen it actually happen. When my wife was almost abducted, they pulled her right through the door, the bedroom door. I mean, they literally floated her up off the bed. She was totally unconscious, and they floated her down the hall, through the door, out through the back door, and out into the parking lot, and then started to take her up into a ship. I grabbed an AK-47. I've become sort of a gun guy now that I've lived on this ranch all this time. So at the time, I grabbed an AK-47 with a double banana clip in it, and I went outside and just pounded both clips into the bottom of that ship. They dropped her, and I ended up breaking her fall, and then we both were out cold in the parking lot in the gravel, because it was, probably a 25, 30-foot fall.
Wow. So you literally caught her. I mean, it's almost as if whatever they were using to pull her up towards the ship, whatever mechanism just stopped after you fired from the AK-47, and you literally
There was a light. There was a brilliant, brilliant white cone of light that they pulled her up into the ship, almost into the ship, maybe a couple of feet away from where the light was emanating from. And she had always told me, she said, John, I don't want to go with these guys. If you kill me in the process, I'd rather have you kill me and then go with them, because I have no control over what happens to me once they take me. And I never accepted that, but I figured, well, I'm going to do everything I can to stop them. And, the light turned off. It just literally switched off, and she dropped, just like a bag of rocks. And, all I could do was just get my body positioned underneath her. I mean, I couldn't even catch her. And she just slammed both of us into the ground. And
that incident where they literally levitated your wife out and started bringing her up towards the ship, did you see any aliens at that time, or did you just notice the fact that she was levitating and heading outside, and that's when you saw the craft?
There's always three. Everything with these guys is always in threes. And so I saw the first three, as they were bringing her out. But, it happened pretty quickly. And there was not any time. I wasn't expecting it. And so I wasn't prepared. And all I could do was, I was just dumbfounded by it. I was horrified, but at the same time, I kind of felt like they tried to use something on me from a mental point of view, a telepathic point of view, to make it almost seem like dreamlike to me, because I had to stumble around the house until I grabbed my gun. And then by that time, they were already out of sight, and I had to run outside in the parking lot and just do what I could.
When it comes to killing them, here's something else in the chat. I'm going to read it. This comes from the unknown. That's the user. It says, when the alien Gray was killed, did he take parts from being and keep them somewhere, or what happened to the body and or head that was cut off?
Well, as I started to talk about earlier, Robert Collins, Captain Robert Collins, had informed me of somebody named Dr. Leavengood, excuse me, in Grass Lakes, Michigan, and that he was a man that had a lot of experience working with cattle mutilations, and he had already spoken to him, and he had agreed to speak to me. And so I had gotten on the phone and talked to him, and I told him what had happened. He was very excited, and he said, well, you're going to have to go ahead and prepare the body and have it shipped to me. And I said, well, how am I going to get a body sent to you? And he said, cut it up. And so I literally dissected it the way he told me to, and, put it in plastic bags and then sealed it up and FedExed it to him.
And you got a phone call from him after he received it after a few days, right?
Yes.
And what did he tell you?
Well, he was fascinated. He also wanted me to go ahead and go out to the areas around the ranch and to the south, where I call it the UFO site. And he said, I want you to get me some samples of grass and other types of vegetation out there, and then FedEx those to me. So I did that as well. And eventually, after I guess what he did was he took the samples, prepared them, and he sent them without saying what they were to a number of different universities all over the country. And the universities subsequently, over a period of a few months, came back with reports, saying what they thought everything was, because, he didn't want to tell them, hey, this is like, a sample of an alien. He wanted their opinion based on what they found. And he prepared a report for that, and, complete with some photographs of the various different samples and the information, and sent it to me. And so I went ahead. That is posted on our website. It's available to anybody who wants to see it. No charge for that.
Yeah, what is your website? Which, again, near the end, I'm going to ask you for everybody else. But go ahead and tell your website right now.
Yeah, you can go to www.alienranch.weebly.com. And there's pictures, there's information there, the whole works.
Now, after Dr. Leavengood received this and realized you were sitting on a smoking gun, what happened after that?
Well, I had told him, I said, look, I'm been forced into this situation. I'm not looking for fame or fortune from this or anything. I would like to do the right thing, and I'd like to, obviously the information is going to be out there. So from a historical point of view, I would like people to say, well, it sounds like this man thought it through and he did the right thing as best he could, and tried to act responsibly as a good American. And that's all I was interested in, was just trying to, handle it so that people wouldn't, say, oh, well, he really messed this thing up. He could have done this and this and this. So Dr. Leavengood, what he was going to do was call a news conference, international news conference, and I was going to go ahead and fly to Michigan, and we were going to present the information together to the world. Well, right before we were getting ready to do that, suddenly Dr. Leavengood ended up dead, and a couple of days later his wife ended up dead. And the samples and everything went with it to some other location. And, I had a couple of people that were in law enforcement that were, capable of being able to go out there and investigate. They went out there and investigated. They said that the trail was dead at that point to them.
It sounds just, the fact that the Dr. Leavengood had something that would blow away the science community, would be the smoking gun for, naysayers like Seth Shostak at SETI, who could finally, have something tangible. It sounds to me like foul play. It does not sound like, unless this man was the unluckiest man on earth for him to die, his wife to die, the sample to go missing, and I believe the lab on fire too?
I don't know about the lab on fire.
Okay.
All I know is they said that he was found face down in the lab and he looked like he'd hit his head on something and he'd passed. That's what I was told.
It begs the question if someone didn't want him to present the evidence and silenced him permanently, which I would hope that's not the case. I really hope that it just was, a tragic accident. But, we never know with these things because there are journalists and others going back to the 40s that have been killed to keep this secret. So I hope that's not what happened to this gentleman. Another really interesting, there's everything about your story, Mr. Edmonds, is so interesting and wild in a sense that, you're interacting with non-earthly creatures from another dimension or another world or both at the same time, and you are still interacting with them, and you've actually killed them and have evidence of the such. That's one of the great things I love about the story so much. Now, one of the pieces of evidence that you have, and I'm going to pull a picture for everybody to look at this, is this extraterrestrial rock with, what does it look like? Is that like a star it's carved inside of it?
Well, I guess it's kind of up to the beholder, the eye of the beholder. But the interesting thing about it is that it's not, it's bigger on one side than it is on the other.
Yeah, I could see it based on what I'm looking at. The picture, it looks like it's the left side. I mean, obviously it could be rotated, but that's what I noticed myself too. But what about it was it that, I'm assuming you sent that to be tested, or who looked at it for you? I'm assuming a geologist or something like that?
No, we've never had it looked at. The way that whole thing went down was that we had some people that came out here that were government people, investigators, or contractors to government. They brought out a whole truckload of very sophisticated equipment, and they were here for a few days. And, they were out on the back of the 10 acres, way in the back, near the end of the property line. And they had set up various different experiments out there to try to test things. And lo and behold, out of nowhere, one of these grays just popped in and was standing there, and then it saw us. And one of the people that was with me there, shined an industrial strength laser right in its eyes. And when that happened, the gray just dropped the rock and it just disappeared. But I ran over and I grabbed the rock and claimed it, and I've had it ever since.
Well, it's a beautiful looking rock, and I've heard from other people that it's almost impossible to carve it in the way it is without damaging it. For instance, each of the, I don't know how you want to call them, if it's a circle with a line going out for each of the rays, I guess, each of those rays, I would imagine, would cave in between each other. That's my personal assessment from it, but the fact that you have something not from this earth that you have in your possession is pretty gnarly. And another question from the unknown in the chat, and this goes back to the killing of the extraterrestrials. Let me read it word for word. I wonder if the other alien greys retaliated after the killing of the one gray, or what did they do after they seen it killed?
Well, everything got really intense. I mean, more intense than it already was. I mean, we went from being just harassed and having these incidents happen to suddenly it was full-on war. I mean, it seemed like almost, I wouldn't say every day, but I mean, every 2 or 3 days, there'd be a new couple, 2 or 3 of these things that would show up and attack us, and that's when Joyce and I started ending up with marks on our bodies. In my case specifically, it literally looked like I was branded on my right calf. I mean, really bad. I mean, like I had like a huge, almost looked like a big burn. And it was a rather significant design.
What was the design of the branding?
Well, it to me, it looked like something that was almost like something from a hieroglyphic. I mean, it was like some kind of, looked like something out of either Egyptian or South American, something like Aztec kind of design.
That's really interesting because for decades, that's what people have talked about when they, for instance, Socorro, New Mexico, with Lonnie Zamora. He recalls seeing hieroglyphic type shapes outside of the white oval craft that landed in New Mexico. Right now, as a matter of fact, I am holding a piece of the Roswell I-beam replica, and that too also is filled with these symbols, which again are similar but don't match anything we have here, which is really interesting that they use symbols, because symbols are like pictograms, where instead of using, when we're reading the English language or any language from left to right, we're using one side of our brain. But yet when we look at a pictogram, we're using both sides of the brain. So that's why I think it's really interesting that that's the choice that they use for their symbols. Okay, back. Okay, picture-wise, I have a picture right now. I believe it's your arm, and there's some spots, possibly burns. I don't know how equally, if they're not equally spaced apart from each other, but you see, it looks to me like it's possibly where they grabbed you by their extraterrestrial hand. Is that what the marks are?
There's, I have had so many of these marks on my body. I mean, over the years, I've had, blood removed, all sorts of stuff happen. I've had them pretty much all over my body. My wife's had the same thing happen. We've even had people that have visited that have had, things done. So, I don't know what to tell you. It's just an ongoing thing.
Now, after you started killing the ETs, first of all, another picture that I have up here, it's actually three different pictures. One is of you. I can't tell so much what's on the right, but in the middle. But to the farthest right picture is a picture of your floor with your samurai sword on the floor. But underneath it is blood stains, and they look reddish. Is that where you killed the extraterrestrial?
That was one incident, yeah.
So there.
Now, realize something that it's not. Depending on the particular circumstance, there were some photographs taken of a dog that was killed. Daisy, the pit bull I described earlier, was killed by one of these grays right outside my back door, going out into my carport. Literally, we were getting ready to come in from the property, and one of these grays appeared immediately right in front of her, and she tried to lunge at it to get it, and it reached down and touched her on the head with something about the length of like one of these mini flashlights, and it made her head explode. It just destroyed her, killed her right there. And so there was a combination of that blood, but I ended up taking out that gray, and the grays themselves, when you kill one, they, instead of having blood, they have a fluid that comes out of them that looks like transmission fluid or brake fluid.
Dark.
Yeah, it's in the case of brake fluid, it'd be like dirty brake fluid, but typically it looks like transmission fluid. It's a little bit red or brown.
Now, I've heard, and I don't know what you were able to get from Levin Good as far as what he told you prior to him passing away, but I've heard that from other people in other instances where there was a dead gray extraterrestrial that may have been analyzed, that they more resemble, the blood more resembles that of plants or something like that. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, well, in the tests that came back from, I think it was at least 3 of the major universities, what they said is that there is hemoglobin, but then there's also plant-like elements to the sample. And so it's not just organic in terms of being, like an animal or a being. It's also plant-like in the fact that it contains both.
Question in the chat: were the grays small or tall?
I've seen 3 different sizes. I've seen them from about 4 feet tall all the way up to almost, I'd say probably, let's see, I'm almost 6'3", so about 6 feet.
Have you ever seen any other extraterrestrials that wouldn't fit the Greys, but something like, for instance, at Skinwalker Ranch, they talk about Sasquatch and also these other 8 foot or taller black beings that have no facial features and no necks? Anything like that?
Well, the what I had been calling the Brillo Man kind of resembles that.
The Brillo Man. Okay, resembles the faceless creature or more of Sasquatch?
No, the faceless creature. I have seen Sasquatch, but not in Arizona. I've seen him in Oklahoma. I have a stepbrother that took me out, and we've repeatedly seen Sasquatch.
The Brillo Man, where on the property did you see Brillo Man, and did you see that Brillo Man inside the house at all?
No, never saw him in the house. Only saw him out around where the horses are. The horse pens are on the western part of the property. There's two. The property is divided into 2 5-acre parcels, and at the far end of the first parcel is where we have a whole bunch of horse pens set up, and that's partially where I saw them. And then I saw them even further west and actually south of the property, not on the property itself, and out in the desert.
There's a question in the chat with goes back to the killing of the Greys. It's about the blood. This is from Josie Flores. It says, "Is there a smell to the blood?"
Not to the blood itself, but there's, in some cases, the Greys smell like spoiled meat. Ooh. I mean, they really smell rank.
And you know what? I've also heard that they are very unpleasant to the smell, and that to me begs the question: is if I'm wondering if they're not necessarily alive. Like, for instance, when you talked about the Men in Black, I've heard from other people that the reason they look human is one of 2 explanations, and one is that that's just their projection. What they really look like is something really ugly. And the second I've heard is that they wear the skin of dead humans, and if that's the case, I would imagine that smell would be putrid.
In the case of the Men in Black, I didn't detect any kind of smell. Both of those incidences that occurred were pretty short-lived. I mean, they only lasted, less than 5 minutes.
Couple more questions in the chat for you. Okay, this is Valerian the Mac 3. Where did you get the samurai sword?
It literally fell off the back of a truck one day.
That's cool.
In front of me, along with a Christmas tree.
Nice.
Somebody was driving through Glendale, and I was behind them, and they took a hard right, and the samurai sword fell out the back. And, I tried to catch up with them to let them know that they dropped stuff, but I couldn't catch up with them. So I just pulled over and grabbed it.
I would too.
Christmas tree home and gave it to my wife.
That's 2 presents right there, right?
You betcha.
Okay, let me read the proper name. This is Zero Pathos. Question reads, does John think that Greys could be artificial, remotely controlled drones?
It's never occurred to me. Anything's possible, but I kind of doubt it. I think that the Greys are probably have a relationship with the reptilians, and I think that they're probably just the small ones are probably semi autonomous, but they're probably programmed to do a specific duty. Like they give them directions and they say, "Here, go do this," and they just go and perform.
Now, you mentioned a portal or portals around the property. What made you determine, because to me that sounds like the most logical explanation, but what made you determine that?
Well, we've seen 2 portals on a regular basis.
Oh, so you've actually seen portals open up, because that was going to be the follow-up question.
Big time. And then on top of that, the folks that came out that were contractors for the government, when they brought all this special equipment out, they laid it out on the ground, and literally it would be like, I don't know, maybe, I want to say about 100 by 200, almost like a mat of these like lights. And they were real fine filaments, and they'd roll them out, and then they'd hook them up to an energy source. And when they would turn those on, you could see that there were like portals that were like the size of a manhole cover, like Swiss cheese, all over the property.
Wow.
And so we didn't even know those were there. We just, when they turned that on, I was afraid to walk. I was afraid I was going to fall in one, but I'd never seen them before until that time. The two portals that we know exist because we've seen stuff come in and out of them is one in the house, in the living room, and then one that's on the back of the property. And that one, literally, when it turns on, it starts out as just a patch of energy, like light energy, and rises up into the sky. And when it gets up, I don't even know how far, it opens up, and it's big enough for ships to go in and out of.
Have you ever seen into a portal, and if it was nighttime for you, you saw daylight, or vice versa? Literally looking into another world at another time?
We've seen lights. That's all I know. I don't know what it was on the other side, but the one in the living room, there have been times like when it turned on that there was a mist, and it, like all these tiny, like little micro, almost like little tiny Christmas tree lights, white lights, would turn on, and you could see depth. You could see that it went off into some kind of distance somewhere. That's all we could tell. And there was a weird smell associated with it. And, we just, all the witnesses got the same effect. And that was, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but they used to have something called paste when kids were little, and you'd paste stuff on, like, it was like a glue, but they called it paste.
Yes.
And kids would always end up putting like a little bit of it in their mouth.
It had,
like a weird taste. Well, that taste is what we smell when the portal opens.
Very interesting. It begs the question of what dimension or what world is on the other side. There's a couple questions in the chat, so everybody hang tight for those. I will get to each of those. I promise that's what I will do to end by asking your questions. There's two other questions.
Let me add one thing to this.
Sure.
With the portals, the big difference between Stardust Ranch and I guess other locations that seem to have portals, and that is our portals don't just go from point A to point B somewhere. They have a time factor involved. We see things come through that are hundreds and hundreds of years old.
Okay, that's really interesting because, gravity affects space-time, and if these craft are traveling by use of creating their own gravity, then I would think that that's, instead of going from one place to another in a straight line faster than the speed of light, they essentially jump from one dimension to another, and a dimension could also mean time. So that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because it begs the question is if they're coming from here, but just from the past.
Well, I can answer that. That's one I can actually answer. And I can't give you the source on this. All I can tell you is that I know that it's true. And that is that time is a human construct, okay? All it is that imagine an XY matrix, and everything that happens, not only in this time frame, but in far past and in the future, is spread out as a corresponding place on a large linear matrix, and they're just points. And so those points are actually even more than three-dimensional. It's and in order to go to one of these points, which is future time or back time, past, you just have to find the points, and you got to have the energy to be able to get whatever you're trying to take there to that location. That's how the whole thing works.
How far do you live from Snowflake, where Travis Walton was abducted?
Ooh, I don't know. I'd say probably 80, 90 miles. Probably more than that. Probably 100, 110.
Still, at least it's within your vicinity. I mean, obviously, that's, a couple hours drive at least, if not longer.
2.5 hours, 3 hours at the most.
Going up in the mountains, that's true. I've been skydiving in Eloy, Arizona, at Skydive,
Hmm.
Arizona. If I'm not mistaken, I believe there is a drop zone in Buckeye. Is that true?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so you're not very far from one. So now I could reference where you are, when I was
I mean,
driving.
we have a Buckeye Airport.
Yeah, I would think that's where the drop zone is because usually, it's where the airports are.
Right.
Okay, last part that I want to talk about, and before I get to the questions that are lining up in the chat for you, is let's talk about the animal mutilations, or specifically in your case, the horse mutilations, and you mentioned the dog mutilations. Are they similar to what other people have reported, where there's no blood and things surgically gone in a precise manner, such as a horse's eyes or something like that? Internal
Yeah,
organs?
with the horses, it was exactly that way. But you could tell that the horse, at least one of the horses, really struggled. The panels that we use for the horse pens are what they call portable panels. They're like 10 or 12 feet long, 4 rail. They're like 1 7/8 inch diameter, steel tubing. And in one case, particularly, the tubing was all bent to hell, just pretzeled. And that was, I think, because the horse was trying so desperately to get away from what was after it.
Jeez, I could imagine the fear in that poor horse. It's really sad. It really is sad. If we ever are able to unlock telepathy within ourselves, the communication that we'd finally have with our own animals on this planet, I can't even imagine what it would be like to feel the emotions of the horse as it's in fear and eventually as it's being harmed. It just breaks my heart to feel that. Okay, let me go through some of the questions in the chat. Rockstar asks, can we take DNA samples on site? I mean, assuming we had a chance to go there and investigate, is that something we can do?
At this point, I don't have anything that you can take it from.
When was the last time you killed a gray?
Been about a year and a half.
Okay, so at least, would you say this is a normal break for you, or I mean, is that something?
There's no rhyme or reason to it. It happens as it happens. I mean, we can have situations where, everything happens, just literally, we'll have a whole bunch of incidences all crammed together, and then it might be 6 months before we have another gray incident. On a daily basis, what we see are almost things that look like poltergeist activity in the house. We'll see these very intense white spots on the ceiling that looks like somebody shining a high intensity light. We'll see things floating around in the room, like bottles of water in the summertime. Sometimes, occasionally, we'll see a small dog float across the room for no good reason.
Huh. But not your dog?
No, they're my dogs.
Okay, so you'll see your dog floating.
Yeah. We've had the incident with the Centurion soldiers where, suddenly there was a power failure for no good reason, and it looked like somebody was shining an old black and white movie, on the wall. And we literally, my wife and I were sitting on the sofa, and we saw these two Centurion soldiers who looked like they came right out of Rome walk diagonally from one end of the house across the house and then go right through the wall and just disappear.
And I wonder if what you said earlier, look in that other dimension hundreds of years back, do you think that's possibly why you're seeing those soldiers, because they're coming into this time from their own timeline?
I don't think they even knew that they were anywhere, here. They weren't acting like there was anything out of the usual for them. It's kind of like, it's not so much about the incident as it is about the fact that I think what happens is time folds back on itself or creates some kind of inverse weird relationship where we're seeing incidents that happened in the past. We just happen to be there in the now, and we're watching that happen, 1,000 years ago.
This next question is from Josie Flores. It's actually similar to a question Lasha asked earlier, but I'm going to ask it because there's a slight variance to it. Not to mention she joined it a little later. So it says, has he ever heard them talk with each other? Meaning, the aliens ever communicate with each other?
No, no. There's with the Greys. I think everything is probably telepathy, but I'm not at the frequency, or I'm prevented from being at the frequency where I can understand what they're saying.
So you just answered the next question, which was, did Greys try to telepathically talk to you? Which is a no, right? Because you're not receiving it. Okay.
Okay.
Ninpo wants you to mention your website again, which I wrote down was Alien Ranch, www.alienranch.weebly.com.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And let's see what else I got for you.
And we have one for our horse organization, which is Hopeful Hooves at weebly.com as well.
Hope for Hooves, right? Hooves?
No, Hopeful Hooves, Hooves. Hopeful Hooves.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see what else I see here. Ninpo, I don't know if this is... I'm not understanding this question as much, so Nin, if you could actually add more to it, but I'll go ahead and say it unless you know what Nin is talking about. It says, what does he see come through? Oh, I'm assuming about the portals. That's probably what it's about. So you've seen craft coming in from the portals, right?
Yes, and I actually have a photograph of the portal open in the daytime, and it's huge. It's just amazing. I mean, it's like it's up in the air, and you could take an aircraft carrier through it. It's so big.
Is this on your website? That photograph?
No. Actually, the whole situation with my website is that it hasn't been updated because I don't know how to do any of that stuff, and I don't have anybody that I'm working with. Everything here is like trying to keep all the balls in the air at the same time, and it all falls on me. And I'm just a 61-year-old guy who likes music and lives on a ranch, and
going through
I don't know how to do all this stuff.
Yeah, and you're going through a very, very remarkable and at times very scary experience. So I got to hand it to you.
It's not scary for me. I've never been afraid of this thing one bit. My attitude is bring it. I'm ready.
I like you. You're cool, John. I really do. I appreciate that. Okay, let me see what else I see here. Okay, Ninpo wants to know, I guess this would be harder to answer, but here goes. Does this only happen in certain parts of the country? I mean, I'll add to this. Have you ever heard any place else outside of Skinwalker Ranch? And I recently heard of Buffalo Ranch in Colorado. Do you know of anything else around the country, if not the world, that has similar experiences?
Bradshaw Ranch. See, what's interesting is that we're like the southernmost version of the three ranches. There's Stardust Ranch, then there's up in the Sedona area. There used to be a ranch there that was called Bradshaw Ranch. I'm not sure what they're doing with it these days. And then after that, there's Skinwalker. The interesting thing about Skinwalker is that all the stuff with the TV show and everything, they didn't start reporting any of that stuff until after what's his name?
Bigelow left.
Had his teams come down here and research everything very thoroughly. Next thing I know, all of a sudden, Skinwalker stuff starts popping up. And their stories and everything that I've reported years ago are pretty much the same.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I really wanted to speak to you because, I first, before I heard about Stardust Ranch, I thought Skinwalker Ranch was just one place around the world. But then I started to hear about your ranch, then Buffalo Ranch. And then I started to look at things differently, like, well, wait a minute. Maybe Bermuda Triangle and Devil's Triangle are acting in the same place. They may not be on land, but in water, but that may be why things disappear and other things show up. So I would think that around the Earth, there are places that have portals, whether natural or, if possible, artificially. But I think that's just what's happened on Earth, because I can't see what another explanation would be for something like this.
Well, I know there's other portals. I know individuals that in Peru that have gone to Peru, and they have actually, dealt with portals there. There are actually a few of them here in the United States because I've met people that have actually worked in official capacity, shall we say, and they have actually used versions of the technology to travel back and forth across the United States.
Do you believe, this is a Nin's question again, are Greys afraid of mass amount of people? So if you were with a larger group of people, do you think the Greys would still come? Or is it just when you are with your wife or a small amount of people?
Well, we've had other witnesses. So, we've had witnesses that were here by themselves. We went out to get pizza for everybody, and we came back, and they were, like hiding behind the couch.
That picture, that's still from the Project Camelot Carrie Cassidy interview where the Grey is peeking on the side of the wall. I've heard of several instances where extraterrestrials literally would peek through the side of a wall, through the side of a door. And I'm wondering if, aside from what was caught without you or Carrie knowing until afterwards, have you ever been in your bedroom and seen your door that was either open or had been open with a head just peeking inwards as opposed to them walking inside and being full-blown head to toe inside?
Absolutely. We have seen these things as other people. I had somebody that was, helping me to plan work on the book. And, she saw them numerous times. We've had lots of people that have seen them. They're here. It's just that they're not ferocious anymore, at least not right now. It seems like we're dealing with, we've had like people that have literally counted as many as 50 or 60 of them here outside at one time.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge number. This next question is from the unknown. I'm assuming unknown caught on a little late after the beginning because the question is, was there more than one Grey killed, which you answered was 19, right?
Yep, exactly. Well, again, I've had conflict with 19 that I believe I killed. I don't know for sure, because it disappeared. There's only 2 or 3 of them that actually, that I know I killed where I had pieces.
Let me see what else I have for you. If you were to allow another team on there, would you allow cameras to be set up around your property to document?
I have offered. I run a ranch, and horses, believe it or not, are extremely expensive to feed and do everything with. And I have 15 of them here right now. In the past, we've had over 100 at different times because, we take whatever, has to basically have sanctuary. And it's terribly expensive. The other problem is that with cameras here, things typically don't want to work. We've had, like when Ghost Adventures came out here, they brought their drone. They had all sorts of trouble getting that drone to do anything here. There seems to be interference at the electronic level for certain types of electronic devices. And it's going to take a pretty sophisticated system here to be able to set it up and mount it and keep it here and then be able to, routinely get information from it. I have no problem doing that. I'm like I've been telling everybody for a long time, I don't plan on staying here. I think we'll probably just end up holding on to the property. But at some point, I want to turn it into a healing center. And the management team here, I would like to have people staying here that can, do all the stuff that normally I would do. But I don't want to live here anymore. I'm sick of it. I'm absolutely fed up with this place.
I would imagine 2.5 decades of this, I could see why.
Yeah, enough's enough.
And you mentioned how cameras and other things fail. That is very, very similar, as you know, with Bob Bigelow and the NIDS team at Skinwalker Ranch. Cameras would either be destroyed or they'd shut off right as something was about to happen, or if in the event the camera was not destroyed and was not disturbed, whatever would happen would be just offside of the camera. Same thing with the drones. So it's, again, something is definitely interfering with the cameras.
Well, see, the thing is with Skinwalker is that those guys don't have an attitude. I got a major attitude, and it's like, I feel like, this was originally supposed to be a dream for me that I wanted to have a ranch, and these little assholes killed it. And it's like, so as far as I'm concerned, if the guys in Nevada, or in Utah rather, if they had the attitude I have, I guarantee you they'd have a lot more results than what they get now.
Yeah,
because that's what it is. It's about the energy. If you gotta bring it attitude, they're gonna bring it, but they don't do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The difference is startling is the wrong word, but it's vast as the way it's being approached there as the way you're approaching it. And personally, if I had to choose between the two, I would rather be around you with that attitude, because I would imagine I would see more and actually feel probably less scared, especially when a gray would pop up and out comes the sword or the AK, and it would just feel like...
I grab them. I mean, I've grabbed them by the ankles and beat them against the walls before.
I love it. That's so cool. Because that actually reminds me, if you've heard of what Travis Walton talked about during his experience, I believe he reached and tried to choke one. And actually, I've interviewed somebody else who was a person who had been abducted multiple times. And the first time as an adult that he recalled being abducted, and he woke up inside the craft surrounded by grays. He freaked out, and the first thing he did is reach and started squeezing the neck, literally to pop it off, the head off this gray alien. And the gray alien ended up sending a telepathic message to him, showing him that if he continued to squeeze, it would pop like a lemon, and that's why he let it go. Personally, I wouldn't have let it go, but it's still interesting. Okay, there's a question. Someone in here is, essentially it's a challenge, which I'll let you answer it one way or another. It's saying that without any proof, this is just another story. For those people who are questioning the proof that you have, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say that, I used to be an expert witness working with the judicial system here in the Superior Court of Arizona. And I've pretty much tried to treat this story the same way I would if I was testifying in court. I mean, we have DNA evidence, we have photographs, we have video, we have artifacts. What the hell else do you need?
Yeah, and in a court of law, that would be more than enough to show, to convict. And let me also throw this out there, because I talked about this the other day, is evidence also includes witness testimony, and especially if there's more than one witness. So if two independent witnesses of sound mind say something happened and say it under oath, well, then guess what, folks? That is evidence. So everything else is just a bonus. Okay, there's a question here about the extraterrestrials' sex. This is from Hypnotic Eyes. Did the gray have any sex organs, a penis or breast? And the reason I'm going to tack onto that is because a lot of people who have come in contact with the shorter grays say there are no sex organs.
I didn't notice anything.
Okay, so I'm guessing that's the similar ones. Are you with regards to all three sizes that you encountered, the 6 foot tall ones and the middle ones and the shorter ones?
I've never noticed any difference. I mean, to me, they pretty much the only difference between any of them is color. I have noticed that some of them, are the gray color, typical sort of a dark gray color. Some of them I've seen that are almost like a tannish brown, and then some of them are white.
This next question, you already sort of discussed. It's from 12 minutes ago. I'm going to read it anyway, just in case you have anything more to add on. This is from the unknown. Was there any other beings besides the Greys that was on his property or even killed?
Nothing else killed, but there have been alien races here.
The 8 foot tall ones that you're talking about, this featureless, that being those beings, right? That you were talking about as well.
Well, I would encourage. I mean, I'm not trying to sell books when I say this, but there's an extensive explanation of the various different beings that have been here and the interactions that we've had with them. Not just myself, but my wife. There was a lady by the name of Dr. Brandy that was here. We had a 2-hour opportunity to sit with two different Sirens that she brought with her, and then out of nowhere, 2 others showed up. So we had an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, get a lot of information, and we've had some ongoing relationships with some of these very interesting people over the years.
One of the most important things I think people should know is your credibility. You can you tell people what you do for a living again?
Well, I do a lot of things. I mean, I'm at this point, I'm co-author on a book, Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story. It's available on Amazon. I do music. I write. I do. I'm professionally trained as a psychiatric social worker. Spent 30 years in the field, working with the state of Arizona, the city of Phoenix, Southwest Behavioral Health, which is the largest behavioral health agency, private agency in Arizona. So I have spent years and years and years working as a therapist and as a counselor.
And
multi-degree.
Your wife, she's retired FBI?
She was FBI and then chose, after all these incidents, to go back to working in mental health. And she works actually working with individuals that are trying to return to full-time employment. And she helps them to do so.
In that one picture that has the sword, which looks like red bloodstains underneath, you mentioned that the blood or whatever is oozing out of these Greys' bodies when you kill them is like brake fluid, right?
Yeah, it doesn't really ooze out. It literally it shoots out. It streams out. It's like it's almost like it's under pressure.
Underneath the samurai sword that's on the floor, if these, or it's like a pool of dried, looked like blood to me. If that's not from the Greys, or is it? What did that blood come from? I know you can't see the picture, unfortunately.
I can't see the picture, so it's difficult to say. But is it outside or inside?
It looks. Let's see. It looks outside, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of Daisy's and the Grey.
Sad that Daisy, your dog, right?
Yes. Yeah, I adopted her from somebody called me like 10 minutes before she was going to be put down and said, "Look, if you can come get this dog, you can save it." And I drove immediately, got in the car and rushed over there and got the dog, and she was a great dog for many years.
It's just so disheartening to know that your pets are killed. And now, out of how many horses did you lose over the 2.5 decades?
3.
Wow, unbelievable.
And they were all within about 1.5 years of each other. And we were very careful to make sure that we called the sheriff, we reported it, they came out, they brought out the livestock board, they brought out everybody that, was necessary and available at the time. And, they investigated it thoroughly. They were here like all day. It was a comprehensive investigation.
Scott Martin Vlogs asks, has anyone ever captured a picture of a dead alien, or are all photos kept hidden?
Well, I don't know about hidden, but the thing about this whole thing is that after what happened with Levengood and some of the contacts that I've had through various different contractors, let's just say, we haven't released all the information yet. And, I'm at this point, in order to make that worthwhile, to go to that level and have that kind of risk. It's going to take some a movie deal or some kind of financial arrangement, because I'm not going to get myself whacked for no good reason.
Yeah, understood. This next question, I think, is a perfect way to wrap up, because it's something that I meant to ask you even before I brought you on this. But let me read it. This is from Lasha Senyak. Does he think he may have been abducted but was unaware of it?
There have been as many as 18 different occasions here that I've been told that I've probably been abducted. I did extensive hypnosis with a gentleman who used to be the president of the Arizona Professional Hypnosis Society, Dr. Robert O'Connor, but he has passed away, and he made comprehensive tapes of all the sessions, and he was able to go ahead and get a lot of information on that subject. I've never spoken about it. Basically, there's kind of like the story I'm willing to put out there and let the public listen to and understand and ask questions about, but that is probably 20% of everything that's happened. I just have not released the rest of the information, because I know when I put it out there, it's going to start a firestorm. And like I said, there's no incentive for me to do it. I mean, the information that's really important is the information I've already divulged in terms of, what's happening here, what's happened here, the evidence that already exists. I'm not interested in being like Travis Walton. Okay. I don't care about the public knowing my personal story. It's unimportant to me. I'm just not in it for anything. I want to remain as anonymous to this whole thing as humanly possible.
I don't blame you. And honestly, I feel sorry that you were brought into the limelight because of something that you didn't even choose to be a part of. So again, I got to hand it to you for having the guts to stand up to these beings and to actually show them that you're not messing around. And if they come near you or your wife, especially to try to take your wife, you're going to let them know by literally killing them and shooting at their craft. So
I'll do whatever I have to.
Amen. It's your family. John, again, I want to thank you so very much for this. I really hope this is the beginning of a long friendship and that we get to do this again. It'd be an honor to speak to you again, because I know I have more questions, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get to all the questions in the chat. So everybody in the chat, I will, if Mr. Edmonds is willing to, then we will bring him back in a few months.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back. I encourage people. I make hardly anything on the book, but the book is a really good example of a lot of the information. And the cool thing about it is it's not just the ranch story. It actually relates the ranch story to, the big picture. Okay. And so it could be a book that anybody could read, whether they know anything about the subject or whether they're an expert. They're going to get something really good out of it. So I encourage people to, purchase the book and read it, or at least share it with somebody.
And it is on Amazon. I did see it available for there. Now, real quick, let me just tell people again, I've said this the last couple times. If you've tried to find me on social media, keep in mind, I have been shadow banned by Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Twitter, because I showed support for President Trump. Facebook and Instagram, I can't imagine why they banned me other than linking my account to the other one. So at the time, there is no Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter for me. When I open up new accounts, I will let you know. Also, please do not email me unless you let me know there's an email there waiting for me. If you need to get a hold of me, please contact Pam Vrettenberg. Also, check out my new site, which has been upgraded. Lots of archives have been added, especially the earlier shows from 2012, 2013, 2014, and early 2015 will be there. Just like that clip I played you for about 20 minutes with United States Senator Mike Gravel calling Edward Snowden a true American hero. That full show is one of the ones that will be uploaded to archives. Now, after I've said my final things, let me go back to my guest and see if he has any final statements for you all, because I will leave the final word on him. Remember his website that he did mention, alienranch.weebly.com. And John, what was the other ranch for your horses? Or the other website?
The other website is Hopeful Hooves at Weebly.com, and we do really good work with the horses. I mean, we save hundreds of horse lives and dog lives, all the time. And I would tell you this: is you should have me back on the show and talk about the future.
Oh, absolutely.
The future is huge, and we have, I've been given lots of technology. I've been given lots of information, and I plan to go ahead and build, projects to actually demonstrate how this stuff can be used so we can make a better world, because that was the whole thing behind it. I had 100 questions that I wrote down, for the Sirens that we met with. I got every one of my questions answered, and we got to see an enormous, just ginormous ship directly across the street from us that they made appear.
Well, that is definitely, I'm already going to bring you back, and now you literally gave me huge topics to talk about, so I will bring you back even sooner than later. Real quick, if you could please hang by after we end so I could thank you off air. Is there anything else you want to tell everybody before we go?
Hey, God bless you. Have a wonderful Christmas. Try to be as peaceful as possible, and look forward to us creating a better world. We all need to work together.
Amen, everybody. I hope you have a happy holiday or happy holidays, depending on what your religion is. I don't know if there's anything else that I will do prior to this Friday, but if I do, it'll be Thursday at a very odd time, because it would be someone from the UK, someone I've been working with for 7 years trying to get a date. I can't tell you much more because if this person falls through, then I don't want to have any problems. However, to give you a hint, it is someone that I booked for Art Bell back when he came back in 2015. So that should give you enough to go on until this interview does happen. So with that being said, this is Dr. J along with the one and only John Edmonds.